In this video, I want to show you step-by-step how to develop one of the most important skills you're going to need to create consistent quality music. And that's learning how to EQ with your ears instead of your eyes. Ultimately, your success as a producer or an engineer is going to come down to how things sound, not how they look on a spectrum analyzer or what some trusty cheat sheet on Instagram is telling you. And that's why I want to show you the fastest way to improve these big old things, because the better they are, the further you will go. Let's be practical here for a second though, because I don't want you to think that you can't use your eyes to help you make EQ decisions in the mix. You absolutely can, but your eyes should be there to confirm what you're already hearing. And in order to trust your ears to make those right decisions, we need to do this first. I'm gonna take a page right out of our Cosmic Academy program and show you something that has not only worked for me, but the 800 other artists I've mentored over the last 10 years. It's learning how to EQ blindfolded. And don't worry, you don't have to cover your eyes with your dirty bath towel. We could blindfold ourselves another way. My first recommendation might force you out of your comfort zone here, and it's gonna be to use EQs that provide little to no visual feedback. Specifically, these analog modeled EQs. Now, we're not here to talk about if these sound better than your stock EQ. That's beyond the scope of this video. We're just gonna use them for the fact that they don't show us much. They really force our ears to make the decisions rather than our eyes. There are already a bunch of plugin companies that make these. You are free to use whichever you like, but I do wanna give you a free alternative if you don't have these. Now, you might be sitting there wondering, couldn't I just do this with my stock EQ or Pro Q and turn off the spectrum analyzer feature? Absolutely. But if you're anything like me, I would stay away from doing that in the beginning. I had zero discipline, and when I used the stock EQ, I would always turn the spectrum analyzer back on to see if what I was doing looked correct. It defeated the purpose. So now that you're staring at this piece of antique digital metal, let's talk about how we can use it to train our ears. I would recommend opening up an older project first. Don't work on your current one. The benefit of doing it this way is if you f things up, there's no pressure. So let's do that with this EQ here. Here's the full song, but I think what makes sense is let's maybe do this on the piano. And I'd always recommend getting comfortable first, just turning knobs. If I had no idea what these knobs do, I could figure it out pretty quickly by just turning them to the max. Okay, I see this is bringing out high-end frequency. What is this doing? Same thing. Boosting. I can cut. I could change the frequency on this knob. This looks like a thin versus broad shape. So all of a sudden, by turning these knobs, no fear, who cares if it sounds like shit? I get an idea of what this is capable of, and I'm forced to use my ears because we can't see the frequency spectrum. This is something you're gonna wanna practice daily. And I would recommend opening up a lot of different EQ plugins. Try this on many different sounds in your mix. The more you vary things, the quicker you're going to find comfort in using your ears. Let's move on to the next step, where I want to walk you through practical EQ scenarios and how to solve them by ear. For this first example, I want to show you how to make the perfect low cuts every single time. And here's the cool part, anyone can do this first try. The key point here, we do not want to do these low cuts in solo mode. The point of these low cuts is to make these specific sounds fit with the other surrounding instruments in the mix. Start with like the 4 or 5 most important sounds for your section. In this case, I'm gonna use my kick. I'll use a top loop to represent the drums. I have my bass, the piano, and 2 lead layers. Keep in mind, I have balanced the volumes of these instruments, and that's why it sounds pretty good already. This is such an important concept to understand though. To make correct EQ decisions, you need to be hearing things at the correct levels. If your instruments are all out of whack and they're not balanced properly, you're going to be making decisions based off of those levels. So what happens is you end up further compounding your problems. I'll link a video in the description if you're interested in learning how to get those proper levels. You can check that out at another time. For now though, I'm gonna start with the lowest or deepest sounds and work my way up to the highest and brightest sounds. That means kick and bass are first up. I'm not gonna low cut this main layer because this actually has my sub bass and I need that sub for the low end. So instead we're gonna jump right to the stereo bass, which is my mid layer, and this needs to stack on top of the main bass. I'm gonna cut some low end frequencies, but I want you and Moose to perk those ears up and listen carefully because you're gonna tell me if this is the correct spot. Well, thank you, Moose, for not caring. I'll be sure to add you in the next video because you bring so much energy to these things. Let me ask you then, was that the correct spot to cut this? No? Well, how the hell did you know that? Oh, that's right. Your ears heard it and said, that sounds like. And guess what? You're 100% correct. So let's try this again, but this time I'm gonna try and find the exact point my ears say, this sounds like, and then just back up a little bit from there. All right, let's find that point. So this sounds like shit. That sounds pretty good. That sounds like shit. Can you hear the difference? For me, it's once I get around here, I'm not crazy about it. So I'm just gonna back up. And notice I could turn this filter on and off and you don't hear a difference because we cut it at the perfect spot. We are still getting rid of some volume below this number, but it has no impact on the mix because that other main layer is sitting underneath and taking that space. So when we cut too much, we hear the gap between those two layers. But if I find that spot where it just starts to sound right again, somewhere in here, we get the right amount of crossover from the main low layer into that mid stereo layer. The key takeaway here is we didn't need to use our eyes. We made a decision based on what sounded right. And that will have more impact on your mix than anything else. Let's do it again with this rolling layer. I'm gonna cut too much, then back up. Here's the layer on its own. Let's cut too much. Sounds like shit here. So I see it 900, I'm not crazy about it. But in this 700 area, I'm cool. Keep it about right here. So did you notice the number on the filter, the frequency? I'd be terrified looking at that number thinking I cut too much, but truthfully, this is what sounded best. I'm gonna quickly jump to the pianos and leads and now do the same thing. Once you finish these main important sounds, you obviously have everything else left in the mix to address. These cuts can be made in a similar way for those sounds, but keep this in mind. Low cuts and EQ in general are not gonna have the same impact on these sounds because they're so much quieter in the mix. You're barely gonna be able to hear the moves that you're making. What you can do is just narrow it down to the group that they sit in and attack it this way. Okay, moving on. If you're not already doing this next part, you are missing out. Let's talk about how to use EQ to color the sounds in your mix. This can be done two ways. The first is going to be when you're actually crafting that individual sound. So think of it like you have a synth opened up, you find a cool patch, and you want to add an EQ afterwards to further shape and sculpt that sound. This extra character that gets added, think of it as an extension of sound design. Let's take an example here and start with my lead. Maybe I want to start to sculpt it and push some of these mid-range frequencies to stand out. All right, so what I'm going to do is boost and sweep. I like the high end. I kind of like something in here too, just not as much. Let's try this one. I actually like the default 1K position here. Let's boost a little high end. Alright, something like this ain't bad. Now let me just make an important move here. I'm going to bring the volume down because we added so much volume on those mid bands. Now flip it on and off. Now, if I don't like any of this, I could just hit undo or delete that EQ. The synth and samples can only get you so far. don't be afraid to push things with EQ. All right, then the other way I like to do this is with those handful of important sounds playing at the same time. EQing this way gives me a different result, which can sometimes be better because there's context. You're hearing how that new shape is going to fit and work with the surrounding elements. Let's switch things up and go in the opposite direction now, and I want to show you how to use your ears to clean up the harsh frequencies in your mix. And let me mention, if you're ever interested in doing these kinds of in-depth lessons in your own projects with us here at Cosmic Academy, there's going to be a pinned comment below. You could apply to our program and work with us. I'm noticing that there's something creating this like piercing noise in the drums. To find the culprit, I'm just going to begin to mute elements one by one in my drum kit until that frequency disappears. Sure enough, it's this ride cymbal. I'm gonna open up an EQ, and this time around, I'm actually going to use my stock EQ or Pro Q. We're not gonna use our eyes, but the reason I recommend this is they are a bit more flexible when it comes to solving these harsh frequency issues. They allow you to control the Q and bandwidth, which allows you to get more precise cuts rather than broad cuts. To start, I'm gonna begin sweeping left to right and try and find the point where that harsh frequency disappears. Notice it's somewhere in here. Then what I'll do is continue to sweep and narrow my Q value, just repeating this process until I find the exact frequency and point where that problem exists. Then I'll just bring everything else back in to find the right amount to reduce it by. Literally just gonna use my ears to tell me when to stop. What sounds right? Okay, so the final part of this process is actually going to come down to what you listen to your music on. Your headphones and speakers play a major role in the quality of your mix, and truthfully, they're lying to you too. This is why your music tends to not translate on different devices, car to phone to laptop to club. We can fix this though. Tap the video on screen, and I want to show you how to make the most out of your current listening situation so you could deliver incredible mixes on any device.